He was a farmer who became a general, a guy whose legend was already rock solid long before the first shots of the American Revolution were ever fired. So today, we're going to dig into the story of Israel Putnam, one of the revolution's most unforgettable and, you could argue, one of its most important folk heroes. Let's get into it.
Okay, so picture this. You're out plowing your fields, minding your own business, and a writer gallops up with news that your country is now at war. Well, for Israel Putnam, there was zero hesitation. He literally dropped his plow right where it stood, told his son to take over, and rode his horse 100 miles in a single day to get to the fight. And that one image right there, it tells you pretty much everything you need to know about the kind of man he was. It's the spirit of the citizen soldier that really fueled the whole revolution. But here's the thing you have to understand about General Putnam. His legend didn't kick off with the revolution. Oh no, it was forged decades earlier, out in the wilds of colonial Connecticut. Before he was ever a general, he was already a bona fide folk hero, known to just about everyone as Old Put. And Old Put wasn't just some cutesy nickname. It was a total badge of honor. It meant he was one of them, a man of the people, tough, tested by the land. And in a war that was going to be fought by farmers and blacksmiths, well, that kind of real, authentic connection was probably the most powerful weapon a leader could have.
So this is the story that really put him on the map. Back in 1743, this one last wolf was terrorizing all the local farms. After everyone and their dogs failed to flush it out of its den, a 24-year-old Putnam decides to take matters into his own hands. He gets his neighbors to tie a rope to his feet, and he crawls into the pitch-black den with nothing but a torch and a musket. He comes out with the wolf dead. I mean, this act of almost insane bravery, that is pure 100 proof Putnam.
So with a reputation for that kind of fearlessness, it's really no surprise that Putnam answered the call when it was time for military service. His real trial by fire came during the French and Indian War, a really brutal conflict that would take the raw courage of Wolf Putnam and forge it into the kind of seasoned leadership the revolution would so desperately need. Get this, he enlists as a private at 37 years old. I mean, that's practically ancient for a soldier back then. But his natural grit meant he rose through the ranks fast. He was constantly staring death in the face, from fighting a raging fire that was about to blow up an entire fort's powder magazine to being captured by warriors and literally tied to a stake to be burned alive, only to be saved at the absolute last second. This wasn't just military service, it was a non-stop test of his will to survive. And check out this quote from a contemporary. It tells you everything about his leadership style, especially when you compare him to the famous Robert Rogers, who led the Rangers. The difference is critical. Other commanders gave orders from the back. Putnam was always at the front, leading the charge himself. His men didn't just respect him for that, they absolutely adored him for it. So when the alarm bells of Lexington and Concord started ringing, Putnam, now a decorated veteran and a living legend, was of course one of the very first to answer. He would go on to become a central figure in one of the war's most iconic early battles, the Battle of Bunker Hill. You've probably heard this famous line before, right? While historians debate who actually said it, it's very often credited to Putnam, and it perfectly captures the rebels' whole situation. They were outgunned, desperately low on ammo. They had to make every single shot count. This wasn't just a command, it was basically the essence of revolutionary warfare. And boy, did they make every shot count. That number, over 1,000, represents a catastrophic loss for the British Army. The rebels' disciplined fire, organized by commanders like Putnam, inflicted a blow so devastating it sent shockwaves all the way back to London. The most powerful army in the world had just been completely bloodied by a militia of farmers. So even though the Americans technically lost the ground, they had to retreat from the hill, they won something way more important: the undeniable proof that they could go toe-to-toe with British regulars and win. As General Nathaniel Greene grimly joked, if they could keep selling every hill at that staggering price, they'd absolutely win the war. The level of trust placed in him was just immense. After Bunker Hill, when the Continental Congress officially created the Army, they named George Washington the commander-in-chief, and under him, they appointed just 4 major generals. And get this, only 2 of those men got a unanimous vote: George Washington himself and Israel Putnam. So why was a guy like Putnam so universally respected? Well, it's because he really represented a new kind of general for a new kind of army. His whole leadership style was completely unconventional, and that was both his greatest strength and, sometimes a source of friction. I mean, just look at the contrast here. The typical British general was an aristocrat who probably bought his commission. Putnam was a farmer who earned it. They were cautious, he was aggressive. They commanded from the safety of the rear, he led from the thick of the fight. His soldiers loved him because he was one of them, and he had the battle scars to prove it. This quote from an enemy officer is just perfect. You can hear the condescension, right? It was meant as an insult, a jab at Putnam's lack of aristocratic polish. But what that Hessian officer completely missed is that he was exactly right. Putnam was precisely the kind of general only the rebels could produce, and that's a huge reason why they actually had a chance to win.
And this personal connection he had with his men was his greatest weapon. At one point, a whole unit was on the verge of mutiny over not getting paid or fed. They were threatening to just pack up and go home. Putnam didn't draw his sword or threaten them with a court-martial. He just rode out to meet them, alone, and spoke to them. Not like a general to his troops, but like one patriot to another. And the mutiny, it just melted away. What I find so fascinating is this little story right here. It shows that Putnam was way more than just a brave brawler. He was a really shrewd observer of politics. While Washington was toasting for a quick and honorable victory, Putnam understood the harsh reality of their situation. He knew a quick, patched-up peace wouldn't actually last. Real independence would only come from a long, hard struggle that totally exhausted Britain's will to keep fighting. And you know what? He turned out to be right.
So what is the enduring legacy of this farmer-turned-general? How is Israel Putnam remembered today, beyond the specific battlefields of the Revolution? Let's take a look.
Late in the war, in December of 1779, a debilitating stroke forced him to retire from the army. His fighting days were officially over, but the legend of Old Put, that was already a permanent fixture in the new nation's founding story.
And the proof of his fame is, well, it's literally written all over the American map. You've got counties and towns, state parks, even a type of apple named after him. His name is everywhere. This incredible tribute really shows just how deeply his story, the story of an ordinary man rising up to do extraordinary things, really resonates with the American spirit.
Which brings us to this final question. Was Putnam's legend, in the end, more powerful than his actual battlefield victories? Some historians might argue that he wasn't the war's most brilliant strategist, but maybe that was never his true value. Maybe his real contribution was the power of his story, the living, breathing embodiment of the citizen soldier, the farmer who dropped his plow to help build a nation. And in a revolution that was all about ideas, that may have been the most important victory of all.